I have the nicest things to say about Drew. We're so lucky to have Droege here this evening, and I'm just so excited. Yeah, you're hearing me? Yay! Oh, I'm so excited. I'm thrilled. So, Drew, we just truly are so lucky. Yay! We're so happy to have him here tonight. He is an American actor, a comedian, a writer, a director. He was a member of the improv comedy troupe, the Groundlings. He performs regularly at the Upright Citizens Brigade. You can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Oh, yes, okay. He was recently a writer on a very touching Netflix show, which I absolutely love, called AJ and the Queen. If you haven't seen it, it is so worth checking out because it has such a beautiful message. He just got back before all of this happened from New York City, where he was in a one-man show, which got rave reviews, called Happy Birthday, Doug. No, you're not. Yes, you're hearing me? Okay. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, my gosh. Oh, okay. So he was in a one-man show called Happy Birthday, Doug, which just got rave reviews and was very well received off-Broadway, so this is no small feat. And I was lucky enough to meet Drew as he was Rose Nyland playing in the parody of the Golden Girls. We're huge Golden Girls fans here at my house, so that was an absolute delight. But what I really wanted to say is one of the most impressive things about Drew is you can just tell in every communication I have had with him, he is just such a kind human and graciously offered to be here tonight to speak with us. He flexed with us when we went to Zoom, and we are just so grateful to have him here tonight. And Drew, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Oh, what a lovely...
Did we get any of that?
Thanks, Emily.
Oh, no.
I heard all of it.
No? Did we get any of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Where did she go?
Did we get that?
Okay, cool. So I apologize in advance if my Wi-Fi goes in and out as well. So if I freeze, I'll come back. I usually just kind of, as welcome to the world now that we all live in the Brady Bunch. Thanks so much for having me. I've never been to a PFLAG meeting, so this is my very first one. But I've known about this organization obviously for 25, 30 years, and so you guys are a really important group. So I'm very honored to be here. And Emily covered so much of my background. I'm not going to talk a lot about myself. I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm mainly here to answer questions that you have and sort of help make this better for everyone here. But yes, I've lived in LA for about 20 years. I grew up in North Carolina, and so I'm from the South, and I went to college there, and then I moved out here 20 years ago, and I started taking classes with the Groundlings, and which is improv. A lot of I'm sure you guys you all know you all know the Groundlings, but it's a lot of SNL people, a lot of character actors have come out of there, and they teach improv and sketch comedy, and it was something that I had never done before, but was really interested in. And I feel like I was very lucky to study at the Groundlings because I had so many LGBT or at least gay male teachers. I'm trying to think out loud about the whole, not all the letters, but it was a very queer and always has been a very queer theater company. From the early days, they invented, Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman came out of there, and Elvira, and just the sensibility at the Groundlings has always been for a comedy theater. It's very pro woman and very pro queer, and so I was trained in that way of just sort of, really bringing your honesty and your truth to your work. And I hear about these other comedy troupes that are very straight white male and they're very heteronormative and you have to fit in with the boys and it's a boys club. I never felt that way at the Groundlings. I always felt so much support, and I was only encouraged to play a variety of gay characters and to tell those stories. And so I developed a lot of my own material there in doing sketches, and got some work and got agents and all that, but I really didn't, nothing was really happening for me career-wise until I started making my own material. And I was mainly just making videos and putting them up on YouTube. And I have a particular series of videos that I made where I play the actress Chloë Sevigny that sort of took off, and that became like my calling card, because without a beard, I do look like Chloe, especially we used to really look alike, I think. So and you know, of all people to look like, you know, but so I started to just, I was really encouraged to be weird and to just follow my brain and my bliss and my heart. And so that was something that those videos really changed my life. I mean, I got a lot of work out of them, but I also did everything from, like, I officiated a wedding. I was in a lot of gay pride parades and parties, and I've hosted a lot of things as Chloe. I call myself an accidental drag queen because I never thought I was a drag queen. I have complete respect, and you know, and I never thought I was that, but I was like, I guess I'm a character actor who plays a lot of women, but you know, so that sort of segued into things like Emily was saying, the Golden Girls. We do, a group of us do word for word episodes of the Golden Girls twice a year. We'll do them again, well, whenever we're back. We're scheduled to do them, I think, in September next, but we'll see when the world that we're in right now. Yes, I've been very lucky to be in a community of just sort of people having ideas and let's put this up and see how it goes. And the last couple years, I've been lucky to write on a couple of TV shows. 2 years ago, I wrote on a cartoon for Netflix called Big Mouth, which you may know about. It's with Nick Kroll, and every comedian on earth has done stuff in it. And yes, it's just, and it's a very filthy show, but it's also a beautiful show. It has so much heart. It feels like the dirtiest Wonder Years, you know, that you get. But the thing that I was so touched by was that in the room, we spent about 3 weeks before we started even, I mean, I was in a room full of hilariously funny people, but we spent about 3 weeks sitting around saying, in 7th grade, here's the worst thing that ever happened to me. And we would all go, I'm so sorry. Oh, guess what? This is what happened to me. And we mapped out the heart and the drama before we started laying jokes on it, before we started doing anything. I felt so close to that room because I felt like we all had sort of gone through just welcome to the dollhouse together. You know, we all had been like, this is probably what made me funny later, because I was traumatized in 7th grade or in 8th grade, you know, and for me, I was like, I would measure a good day. I would come home and it wasn't even a thing for me. Like, I think back and it's so tragic to talk about it, but in the moment in 7th grade, I would come home and I was like, if I wasn't called a fag today, that was a good day. That's how I measured a good day. And it's like, it's like horrible to think about that kid, but that's just was the reality for me. And like, so sharing that in a room, I never thought I'd be writing on a comedy show and like sharing that in a room full of people. Also, I was the only queer writer in the room. And so one of the characters on the show, Andrew Reynolds, plays the gay character on the show. And he's hilarious because he's like the bully. If there is a bully on the show, it's the gay kid. He's really imperious and snotty and like looks down his nose, which is just a really fun flip of the idea. But the kids, you know, in the world of Big Mouth and in 2020, the kids are very accepting of the gay kid. They're really kind of terrified of him because Matthew, the character, is terrifying. But I was able to provide my perspective because it was interesting in a room full of straight people who obviously all wanted to get the story right. They didn't have the personal experience. There were a lot of things where I would say, actually, it's more this, you know, because someone suggested one plot line where there's a slumber party where all the boys get together and then they realize it's kind of weird with the gay kid there. And I was sort of like, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I feel like now the straight kids wouldn't have that panic. They wouldn't really care. It's the gay kid that might be weird about it. The gay kid is the one who's going to say, I'm not like everybody else. And I hope they don't find that out. And I hope they don't know. And I hope they don't think that I'm going to try anything tonight. And so I was like able to say, I think the gay kid is the one that we need to say feels weird in the situation versus the straight kids feeling weird about the gay kid, which they were, you know, just things like that I think those of us who are in the LGBT community or who are parents, friends that understand on a very personal level, So I felt that made me feel really useful and good in the room, on top of like, you know, trying to be funny every day, but I got to kind of use that. And then last year I wrote on a show that Emily was talking about called AJ and the Queen, starring RuPaul. And it was an incredible experience. It was RuPaul and a 10-year-old girl who, you know, as the show sort of progresses, she goes by she's sort of non-binary a little bit, you know, she just doesn't care about gender. I think we wanted to make it clear that we didn't want to make it we had so many messages in the whole thing, and you know, you're sort of led to believe in the pilot that it's a little boy because she's such a tomboy and she's street smart, and then you realize it's a little girl, and so Rue's character assumes that she may be trans or non-binary or, you know, something like that, and she's just more like, I'm AJ. I don't, you know, I'm 10, and so we wanted to explore that without it being like her really like sort of, you know, she's finding all kinds of aspects of her identity. And so we only got to do one season. I'm sure if we did a second season, we would lean into that more as she got older. I think that was definitely something that we wanted to deal with. But that was a show where we got to use a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race contestants and cast members from those shows, but they were cast as actors, and they usually played drag queens, but we got to see them at home. We got to see them depressed. We got to see them not fabulous in some way. And we really got to meet these people and these characters. And so in that room, all of the writers identified as LGBT. And so that was really exciting to sort of not be the token in that room and sort of be like, oh, so there was just this really wonderful, you know, and it was a very small room. There were only 5 of us that were sort of working on that show. And it was really hard and it went really fast, but it was very rewarding because I felt like we were all making something new for the first time. I mean, Rue had never done the lead on a television show, playing a character that had it was a lot like him, but also very different from him as well. So that was I got to write an episode of that, which was my first time writing an episode of TV, and it was just an incredible. I'm so lucky that was the show that I got to do that for. So I find that it's getting it's, I don't want to say it's easier, but with so many things on TV, we're so much more like prevalent. We're popping up in so many other spaces now. So there's not just one gay show. I think it was always so hard in our community that, you know, we always hated whatever one gay show we had in front of us. And then in the minute it got canceled, we would say, well, that network's homophobic. And it's like, well, if we watched that show, maybe it wouldn't be canceled, because like we didn't support the one thing that we had. A lot of the times we would, you know, and then we would moan that we don't have enough material, and the business model would just say not enough people are watching it. We think it's great, but people don't watch it, it's gone. So I think now with all the digital platforms and everything, they're taking more risks, and a lot of it in animation and also in narrative. And you know, it's very common now. And even I know that when I, you know, I you know, as we all have, tried to educate like my mom and family members about it, but my mom now will just casually, you know, use the word trans, like, and she 2 years ago she never would have said that, and she would just, you know, and be like, well, there was a character who was trans, or I saw a reality show about it. My mom was telling me about I Am Jazz that in South Carolina. My mom has started watching that, and she's like, you know, and so it's like it's in front of people a lot more, which is really exciting, because it's I hate to use the word normalized, because I think, you know, I like, you know, being unicorns and not feeling like we're just like everybody else. But yes, we are, like, you know, we're seeing so many other, you know, ways of doing it, so that shows are more about the people, and they're focused more on the, you know, who happen to be fill in the blank, and as opposed to here is the gay story or the trans story that you're going to get, and it's going to be only about that experience, versus these people who you know, come at this in different ways. So it's an exciting time to be, you know, in the creative side within TV, and I feel like film is a little behind, because with movies are harder to get done, but I'm hopeful that they will be the same way. So I don't know, I guess I'll just open this up for questions. Any questions that anybody has? If you want to just send it in the chat, I guess that's how we were gonna do it.
Well, I don't see any questions yet, but can you talk about like how and why that's changed? Because is it really just that there's so many more shows, so there's much more opportunity, or what do you think? Did something kind of open the floodgates, or what do you think has led to this?
Well, I think for sure, I mean, I think we have, I think, and other people may have a better answer than this, than I do, but I definitely think, with Obama, with marriage equality, with all, when we had that moment of just sort of opening windows and just showing, I mean, the internet has been the greatest, because for me, like when I would, before, we had this much access to YouTube and all that, I would pitch ideas to networks. I would go in, I auditioned at SNL and they were like, we love it, but every character is like Chloë Sevigny and, like the guy from, Queer Eye, like who's, they were very limited and they thought gay was a very limited flavor. And the internet has shown there are people all over the world that have forever existed and so you put something on YouTube and you have a community for it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, there are a lot of people who are not what the networks think are going to watch this thing. And I think that people are less scared of watching things. It's when I think about people like my mother, who's very open-minded, but also like, I don't know that she would have, she might have been channel surfing and click on logo and say, oh, it's, the Golden Girls or Grease 2 or whatever's on logo tonight. But, I think like there's just more things that just catch people's eye, that because there is, so I think it's a lot of different factors, and I think, I also think too, that in hiring, people have been very conscious to hire behind the camera, like the writers, the creators who are in the LGBT community. Because I know for me, I'm always happy to do a part, but when I get a role and I read it and I go, a straight person wrote this. And a very sweet, loving, like, but you read it and you're like, oh, my character says bouquet and drops a purse and grabs a Cosmo and then like, kind of flitters out. Thank you for the paycheck, but that's not really like moving the story forward. That's not really like any gay man that I really know or, hang out with. So when there's a queer person in the room, they might say, maybe he doesn't have a purse, maybe he doesn't wear heels. And if he does, that's great, but maybe, they're a they, or maybe they don't have a fabulous jokey name, like just little things that, you start to see that like, let's tell this authentically versus just being like, the gay person walks in and it's a joke. The joke is they're gay, which used to be it. Goodbye. Now back to the story, and now it's like, no, let's hear from them. Let's meet this person who has more levels. I'm sorry, there's so many questions here.
So there was a question that kind of relates to that, asking about how do you feel about LGBTQ actors playing like cis and hetero roles and vice versa. So again, that might go to the authenticity of those portrayals.
Yes. I have I shift on that a lot. And I find that I used to be an actor is an actor is an actor. And the best actor should do the role. Like, and I do think that in a lot of ways, like for me, like Bill Hader and the Skeleton Twins, beautiful. Like that was an incredible performance. I thought he was great in that. I have seen plenty of hetero actors play, play gay actors. Obviously, I don't think it's okay for cis actors to play trans. I feel like we have so many. The problem too is we don't open the net enough. Like, so we say the best actor should get it. And then they maybe would see 2 trans people, or you have a network that doesn't understand the difference between drag queens and trans women. And then they end up just casting a movie star and saying, put them in makeup and we got a name. And they don't think about the nuance there. And trans friends have told me that they don't get roles because they don't look trans enough. Like they're being told, because the networks want it to, and it's just like, what does that even mean? So they have, until there are enough opportunities for everyone, then I firmly believe that trans actors should play trans roles. The tricky part is when you're playing, a lot of times, real people. I don't know who ended up getting the part. I read one time for it was and you all may know who I'm talking about, in, I want to say like Northeast somewhere. There was a mayor who was, I believe, non-binary, went by he, wore a lot of dresses, but you know, and it was this, so they were seeing all different kinds of actors in that situation based on a real person. And that was his truth. But it's like, and I sort of was asking like trans friends, I'm like, is it weird that I'm here? You know, and it's like, so it's a complicated question when you get into playing real people, because you do say, yeah, but we're all, you know, unicorns. We're all special in different ways. And so I don't think there's one hard and fast rule about it. I do think though that on the flip side, I, you know, obviously present pretty gay, and like I can butch it up and play straight, but I never get considered for roles that are not roles name, comma, gay. Like that's it that I usually get in on. So I have occasionally been offered parts where the sexuality of the character has nothing to do with the story. And I'm so thrilled to do that, because it's like, thank you. I'm an actor. I don't need to represent, you know, my community every time I come on screen. I might just be some monster person coming in and just, you know, and, you know, for the comedy of the scene or whatever, I'm not like, you know. So, but it's that thing too. It's very hard for like out gay actors to get work when we're not movie stars, and because straight people might get our part, and we never get to go in on their parts. So it's like, so the net isn't big enough yet for who they're seeing for stuff.
Let's see, people are asking about some of your favorite LGBTQ shows or movies that you think are most representative, best representative of LGBT identifying persons.
I'm very partial to Transparent, especially the beginning few seasons. I think it's one of the most beautiful shows that had so many layers to it, and I was so there for it. I tend to like complicated, broken, horrible people. So I know a lot of people watch that show and they're like, all the kids are monsters, but I love that personally. What else have I seen recently? I was talking to a friend recently. I love the movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I felt that was exactly the age that I am. I was those kids watching that going, oh, that was so me. I wish I'd had that movie when I was a kid coming along, going to Rocky Horror and not really knowing what I was, you know, in the 90s and that whole time. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I'm very involved with Outfest, so I see several things. Circus of Books is on Netflix right now. It's fantastic. I loved it. I don't know. I mean, I see so many, but those are the ones that pop to my mind right now.
For anybody that doesn't know, Circus of Books documents a story about a PFLAG family. So,
yeah.
Yeah, so Karen Mason and Barry Mason are leaders of the PFLAG LA chapter. So it's a great story, and they're very unlikely people to be living the kind of lives that they led. So it's
totally.
Yeah. What other questions do people have? People have asked about how you got started in the business and came to LA in the first place, and did you start with the Groundlings, or did you do other things before that? Or
I did. After college, I went to Wake Forest in North Carolina, which is a liberal arts school. It's not an acting school at all. They never tell you that you could ever have a career as a creative person. One of those schools, it's all about like learn and write papers, and then maybe go into academia or go and be a lawyer or whatever. They never, you know, there's a lot of great about that too. But I never thought it would, it wasn't really real to me. I just had a lot of friends who lived out here, and I had read about the Groundlings. I had seen a movie earlier the year. It was called Go, and it was like all these different people in it. And there was an actor in it who had maybe 3 lines, and I became obsessed with her. And I was like, she's my favorite. She's the funniest person I've ever seen. I want to be able to do what she can do. And I went into the Groundlings, and I went in the lobby, and I saw all these famous people that I loved forever, like Lisa Kudrow and Jennifer Coolidge and all these people that I was just like in awe of. And then I saw that actress from that movie Go, and I was like, okay, her name is Melissa McCarthy. I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to follow her because I'm a fan for life. And she was in the Sunday Company at the time. So it felt like a sign, like I wanted to study there. And it was very hard. I did not go through the program easily. I had to repeat a lot of levels, and it took me years to go through it. And but it just kept me in LA. I met my tribe through the Groundlings, and I met like-minded people who were really smart, kind people who were really interested in how people tick. And so they weren't just sort of vapid image-based actors that you always hear about in LA. That that exists too. But I felt like I met a lot of people who were really pretty wonderful and challenging each other, like to make really good work. And so I just kept doing that, and then sort of fell into it. And then about like 10 years out into it, I was able to just sort of sustain as the creative person, because I was waiting tables and I was doing all of that for the first 10 years that I was probably here. And then the last 10 years I've been able to kind of be creative for a living, and sometimes that means I'm teaching. I teach at the Groundlings now, or writing or acting or a combination of all those things. So it all just kind of unfolded. It's continuing to take a long time. It's not like, and I just landed in LA and it just all worked out for me. But I just always felt encouraged because I had that community with the Groundlings.
So there's a question here about LGBTQ kids and teens watching these shows. Like, what do we know about that audience? We see that there seems to be so much more identification or open identification with the LGBTQ community among younger kids. And are you seeing that as far as a growing audience goes?
Absolutely. I think AJ and the Queen they pretty much, I know Rue really wanted to do a show with a child, like loves kids, but Rue's demographic, Drag Race demographic, is 13-year-old girls. That's like the main target audience. And a lot of straight kids, or kids who don't know yet, or kids who are just not even, so what is exciting about that is that I think kids understand sexuality above sex. Like they look at it as like sensibility, and they look at it as like flavor and style above they don't really understand especially before puberty and all that. And so they're just into like wigs and funny over the top people, and people who get mad and throw a drink in someone's face that we would call camp or something. They understand on that level. They're almost more savvy than we are on some level. My brother showed his kids a picture of RuPaul. This was when they were really little, and it was just a composite, and he was in drag in one picture and out of drag in another. It was the same picture. And they said the kids, the only thing they couldn't understand was like, how is the same person in one picture? But it did balk at all. Like they were just like, oh yeah, that's him as, as a lady, that's him as a man. Great, moving on. Like they just had no issue with it. And so my brother and his wife were like, well, I guess we don't really need to sit them down and, so I think there's that's happening. It's also, I don't know, I'm not a parent, and I don't know what it's like to, as you're sort of helping a kid along in terms of like what they can handle and watch. Because I know I loved, as a very young kid, I loved John Waters movies. I had not the early John Waters movies, but like Hairspray, Cry Baby, that sort of, and those, you watch those movies and you're like, these are so subversive. And I was young, but I so connected because there was that queer thing that I didn't even know what it was, but I knew I need to be in this is what I need to be watching more than, whatever, the Rambo that my friends are all watching or whatever. So, but I don't, I'm sure it's a challenge when you are watching something going, how far do we go with the kid? Because, I don't know how to answer that, you know what I mean? But I do think that kids have a lot to teach us for sure.
So you were saying that you think a lot of the just increase in shows, or maybe the improvement in shows, a lot of that is related to having strong representation from the LGBT community, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera and in the writing, all of that. Just so you see that there is a lot more opportunity now for people, younger people in particular, to be moving into the industry, that they're actively looking for people who can write authentically about those stories?
Absolutely. The biggest advice that I would give anybody now is be your truest self when you go, you know, because they are looking for that. I used to feel like in certain communities that I, you know, it's like I wouldn't, not that I really had to hide as much as like kind of immediately go into a room going, they're not going to get my sense of humor. I can be quieter. I don't really need to take over. And now it's like, I realized, especially in Big Mouth, there were a couple times that I would be like, I need to, should I? And I'm like, and I had to say to myself, Drew, this is why you got the job. You need to speak up and say, this is, you know, this is the authentic way to tell the story. And they were so receptive to that. I mean, if anything, they were like, thank you so much for speaking up and saying that. So I see it's very encouraging, you know, with diversity in general, it's like people realize that like, we can't tell a story with all of one type of, you know, perspective and one type of human being. There's no way you can do that. So absolutely, it's very encouraging.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions? Nothing else? Are you going to be able to restart your show go back to Broadway?
I hope so. I was doing my show in New York. We opened at the end of January and we closed the beginning of March, obviously, when everybody else had to close. So we were only scheduled to run through the end of March. We had like 3 weeks left. And I had to come back here anyway in April. And so we're scheduled to do 2 weeks in June, but I'm waiting any day now to get the message like, hey, we're going to not be able to do it in June. There's no way we're going to be able to do it in June. The good thing about a solo show is that, you know, it is just me up there. So we're talking about possibilities of, you know, live stream where we can maybe put me somewhere where I can go, you know, and so we don't have to all be on top of each other. So solo shows might be able to creep back in a lot earlier than the like Les Mis type shows where, you know, you have, you know, 400 people on stage together. But the problem is these small theaters, or in the big theaters, I mean, even Broadway theaters, they have a really hard, they need to sell every ticket in order to make money. Like they can't just take out every other seat. Their tickets will be $500 or something for them to get their money back. So it's going to be a hard thing for them to figure out how to, you know, make all that work. But my show's really cheap. So hopefully they'll be able to get it up and running soon. Oh, my show, someone just asked what my show about. My show is called Happy Birthday, Doug, and I played 9 gay men at a birthday party from hell. So it's basically, I'm all the people talking to the party guests. So I come out at the very end of the show as Doug, but you're meeting all the different, you know, party guests. And so it's a lot about friendship, about gay men in 2020, how awkward we are around each other, how much we need each other, how terrible we can be to each other, how, you know, so it's just a comedy, but it also, I sort of deal with a lot about like our similar threads and multi-generational. I play different ages of men at the party, and I play an older man who, you know, goes, you know, and basically is name dropping a lot of old references to, you know, to like Linda Blair and Tab Hunter and things like that. And then I have younger kids, you know, a waiter at the party who's in his 20s, who's hyper woke and really worried about like being, you know, politically correct. And so I just a lot of it is just sort of just exploring kind of my perspective as, you know, everything gay right now in my world in 2020.
So I have one other question here, and I have to say I just learned something. It says, Drew, when do you think Hollywood will be ready to present a story with a leading character who is NB? And I did not know what that was, so I had to look it up, non-binary. Thank you, Catherine.
Great.
And so wondering about a leading character who's non-binary and presents that lifestyle is kind of as normal. And
right. I think that's a great question. I think now, like where we're headed, we're going to have to find an actor who is themselves non-binary. I think that's because I can see now they would do it. The thing is too, the business side is like, who can help sell, who can sell tickets, who's a big enough name to get people to buy it. And I know there have been some actors who have come out as non-binary or genderqueer, but I don't know that we have. Oh, great! Christine says Billions has a main role. Oh, yes, they yes. I know who you're talking about. It's only a matter of time, but I think now they would be really remiss if they put, Russell Crowe. I mean, that's a terrible example, but or someone like that, where you would be like, oh no, that would be horrible. So it really needs to be someone who has walked in those shoes. And Asia, Kate Dillon. Okay, great, thank you. So they are on the show Billions and non-binary as well. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting, because it's something that, I mean, it's something that I would love to learn about. I mean, I guess a lot of it I understand as a performer who identifies so much with women or with characters that don't really choose a gender. They're, in my own experience, I don't necessarily wake up every day being like, wow, I feel like such a man, I'm such a he. But I do choose those pronouns. That's my experience. But I would love to know, I would love to learn, from that story. I think that's definitely one that will be needed very soon.
Okay, anybody else? All right, Drew, thank you so much. That was really wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for all that you do, because it's a very important, beautiful work that we need a lot more of, especially right now. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop recording here. Everybody can see that.